Teacher told janitor to solve an impossible IQ challenge as a joke. What happened next shocked everyone. The bell echoed through the halls of Westbridge High, the sound fading into the usual shuffle of sneakers and chatter. Mr. Reynolds, a respected but occasionally smug history teacher, leaned against the doorway of room 204, smirking. In his hand, he held a printed sheet, an IQ puzzle supposedly designed to stump even the brightest minds. It had circulated on some elite educators' forum the night before, boasting that fewer than 1% of PhDs could crack it without assistance. "Morning, Carl," he called out casually as a figure rounded the corner. Carl Jenkins, the school's janitor, wore his usual navy coveralls and pushed his cart with a quiet grace. At 62, Carl had been part of Westbridge for longer than most of the staff. He was reliable, friendly, always humming old jazz tunes and sweeping up the remnants of teenage chaos. Few knew much about him, only that he was widowed and lived alone in a modest apartment not far from the school. Mr. Reynolds, with students already filing into his classroom, waved the paper in front of Carl like a magician presenting a trick. "Hey Carl, got a minute? I've got a little challenge for you." Carl chuckled softly, parking his cart near the door. "Challenge? At 8 a.m.? You trying to start trouble, Mr. Reynolds?" The students laughed. Some watched curiously, others scrolled through phones. Mr. Reynolds raised his eyebrows theatrically and handed the sheet over. "Just a fun brain teaser. Supposed to be unsolvable. Figured you might like a crack at it while you wait for the floors to dry." There was a ripple of laughter through the hallway, most of it good-natured. But something about the way Reynolds said it, half joking, half condescending, didn't sit right with Julia, a quiet sophomore with a love for numbers and a deeper respect for Carl than most. She watched carefully as Carl took the paper, studied it, then smiled faintly. "I'll give it a look," he said simply, tucking the sheet into his pocket. "Thanks for thinking of me." What nobody expected, certainly not Mr. Reynolds, was what would happen next. It was 2 days later when Julia found Carl in the library. She liked the quiet there, and it surprised her to find the janitor sitting alone at a table, the IQ puzzle in front of him. He was scribbling on a notepad, equations and diagrams cluttering the page. "Carl?" she asked gently. He looked up and smiled. "Hey there, Julia. Didn't expect company." She glanced at his notes, eyes widening. "You're working on that puzzle?" Carl laughed. "I'm trying. I don't usually bother with things like this, but it got stuck in my head. I used to do this sort of thing a long time ago." Julia sat across from him. "You used to do IQ puzzles?" "I used to teach," Carl said, surprising her. "Math and theoretical physics. That was, a few lives ago." She blinked. "Wait, really? What happened?" Carl's smile faltered, just for a second. "My wife got sick. Cancer. Treatments weren't cheap. I sold everything, gave up the job. I needed something that paid fast. Took a janitor job in a hospital at first. Then here." Julia didn't know what to say. There was a weight behind his words, but no bitterness. Only grace. "You're amazing," she said. Carl laughed. "Nah. Just an old man who misses playing with numbers." But Julia didn't forget that conversation. That night, she told her mother, who worked in administration. And that's where things began to spread. By the end of the week, whispers were floating through the halls, the janitor was some kind of genius. At first, students were skeptical. Teachers scoffed. But then, something happened. Carl returned the puzzle to Mr. Reynolds during a lunch period. Handed it to him casually while wiping down the tables. "Thought you might like to see this," he said. "Solved it last night." Mr. Reynolds raised an eyebrow, only to go pale as he skimmed the answer. It wasn't just right, it was elegant. Annotated, reasoned, every step clear and flawless. He checked online. triple-checked. It was correct. The next day, Principal Dana Morris called Carl into her office. She wasn't mad. She was stunned. "We've had this challenge floating around the staff lounge," she said. "Most of us couldn't even figure out where to begin." "Carl, is it true, you used to be a professor?" Carl nodded humbly. "MIT, originally. Then I taught at a few community colleges after my wife's diagnosis. But life had other plans." She stared at him. "Why didn't you ever tell us? You never asked." The story broke wide within days. Julia, ever curious, posted on social media about her discovery. "Our school janitor solved an unsolvable IQ puzzle. Turns out he used to be a professor before life knocked him down. He never told anyone. Just swept floors and helped kids with their math when they asked." The post went viral. News crews started showing up. Interviews. A GoFundMe began, started by Julia, who said, "Carl gave up everything to save someone he loved. Maybe it's time someone gave back." It raised $120,000 in 4 days. But money wasn't what mattered most to Carl. What mattered was the way students started treating him. He wasn't invisible anymore. He was asked to speak in classrooms, help with math clubs, tutor kids after school. He shared stories, not just of equations but of perseverance, loss, and the quiet strength of doing what's right when no one is watching. One day, in front of the entire school, Principal Morris announced that the staff had voted unanimously to offer Carl a special position, academic consultant and mentor. Part-time, flexible, and with full pay. He wept that day. And he wasn't alone. A few weeks later, Mr. Reynolds approached him quietly in the staff lounge. "Carl, I owe you an apology. I gave you that puzzle as a joke. I don't know what I thought. That you'd laugh it off." Carl looked at him, eyes kind. "It's all right, Tom. Sometimes we're surprised by the people we pass in the halls." Mr. Reynolds nodded. "Yeah. I've learned a lot these past few weeks." Carl extended his hand. "So have I." The final surprise came 3 months later. Carl received a letter. It was from MIT. An old colleague had heard the story and nominated him for an honorary doctorate, something awarded only to those whose contributions to knowledge, integrity, and human spirit made an undeniable impact. He accepted it in Boston, in front of a cheering audience that included Julia and her mother. As he stood at the podium, gray hair soft under the lights, he said, "I used to think I gave up everything. But I realize now, I was just taking a longer road back to what matters. Life doesn't always follow equations. Sometimes, it's the unsolvable puzzles that bring us back to ourselves." Back in Westbridge, the janitor's closet remained. But now, it had a plaque. Carl Jenkins Learning Center, for the quiet geniuses among us. And every week, students would gather there, not just to learn math, but to listen. To ask questions. To hear about a life lived with quiet dignity, deep love, and relentless hope. Because sometimes, the most brilliant minds don't wear lab coats. Sometimes, they push a mop, hum a tune, and wait for someone to ask who they really are. Let me know if you'd like this formatted into a spoken script, or broken into sections for audio narration.